The jungle had forgotten how to move. Morning light spilled through the trees in narrow, uncertain streaks, turning dust and mist into floating silver threads. The air was still, heavy enough to muffle the usual sounds. No monkeys calling, no birds marking the dawn, no rustle of leaves above. The silence wasn't peace, it was suspense. Something was missing. High in the canopy, a branch curved over an empty clearing. Thick, scarred, bent slightly downward from years of holding something heavy and alive. Its bark still bore faint scratches, the imprint of claws that once climbed it with lazy precision. Below, in the shadows, the undergrowth waited for a familiar movement that never came. The leopard had been gone for 3 days. The jungle didn't know what to do with that kind of absence. It wasn't used to stillness without cause. When he was alive, his silence had been a living thing, patient, alert, dangerous, the kind of silence that made the forest listen. But now, that silence was gone too. What remained was hollow. A parrot called once, hesitantly, then stopped halfway through its cry. The sound broke like glass. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a branch snapped under its own weight. Even the air smelled wrong. Less like rain and musk, more like dust. The forest floor was littered with half-eaten fruit, untouched. The deer didn't graze here anymore. The monkeys had moved to the far ridges, where the trees still whispered. Beneath the empty branch, a pool of water reflected the canopy. A shadow passed over it, not of the leopard, but of a circling vulture. It made a slow loop, then drifted higher, uneasy. The jungle didn't bury its dead, it simply forgot them. But this one, it remembered. The leopard had ruled the stretch of land between the river and the cliffs for 7 seasons. He'd moved like a rumor, fast, quiet, untraceable. The sound of his breathing had been enough to keep the forest balanced, every creature obeying the unwritten law of fear. Now, that law was broken. A troop of langurs gathered in a nearby fig tree, watching the clearing. One of them climbed out onto a branch, staring at the ground below. He barked softly, a call not of danger but confusion. The others didn't answer. From the direction of the river came the cry of a peacock, loud, defiant, wrong. The call echoed across the trees and died without reply. The jungle exhaled once, deeply, then held its breath again. Because something always comes to fill a silence that lasts too long. And as the sun rose higher, the air thickened with waiting, the kind of stillness that knows what it's missing and doesn't yet know what will come instead. The forest, patient but uneasy, began to listen for footsteps that would not return. The branch above creaked, quietly, as if remembering. By the second sunset, the jungle began to forget caution. The heat had risen all day, and the air shimmered between the trees. The insects returned first, cautious, scattered, their droning uneven as though unsure if it was safe to sing again. Then came the smaller birds, the ones that lived off what others dropped. And with them came the hyena. She had wandered in from the dry lands beyond the cliffs, following the scent of rot and old water. Her coat was dusty, her ribs sharp, her gait limping but steady. She was no pack hunter. Not here. Not anymore. The leopard's absence had drawn her like blood in the wind. The jungle didn't welcome her. The trees here were too dense, the shadows too deep. The soil smelled wet and unfamiliar beneath her paws. Still, she pressed forward, head low, sniffing the trails that wound between the roots. The smell of prey lingered everywhere. Deer, boar, monkeys, but faint, as though the forest itself was holding them back. She reached the clearing before nightfall. The air was thick with flies. Beneath the leaning branch where the leopard had once slept, something small and old lay curled in the dirt. A carcass, long dried, its bones half buried in leaves. The hyena sniffed it once and backed away. The scent of power still clung to it, faint but undeniable. Her laugh came out suddenly, harsh, short, defiant. The sound cut through the quiet like a stone through glass. The trees seemed to flinch. The jungle listened. No answer came. No growl from the shadows, no low rumble from above. Only the echo of her voice fading into the heavy air. She laughed again, longer this time, forcing it. A hollow sound, more nervous than brave. The echo carried farther, touching the river, the ridge, and the edges of the forest, where the deer still waited. That was enough. The stillness broke. Birds rose in startled flocks. Monkeys screeched from distant branches, and somewhere in the undergrowth, a snake moved faster than it should have. The jungle had remembered what it feared, and found that the thing it feared was gone. The hyena grinned, pleased with herself. She stepped closer to the tree, circled the clearing once, and sat down in the leopard's place. The branch above her creaked again, bending slightly. She looked up, unconcerned, her yellow eyes reflecting the last light of day. The forest watched her. When the sun fell completely, the noises of night began again. Frogs, crickets, the far-off cry of an owl. Life returned, noisy and uneven. But beneath the noise, a new rhythm began to form. The rhythm of things without order. The jungle was awake again, but not balanced. It had too many voices now, and none of them spoke the same language. The hyena settled into the dirt, content for now. She had claimed what was left of the leopard's silence. Above her, the wind passed once through the canopy. The branch shuddered but did not break. The forest exhaled. The hyena laughed again, softer this time. And somewhere deep among the roots, the ground shifted. Just a small motion, like a breath taken too late. The jungle, it seemed, had not finished holding its breath. By the third day, the forest no longer whispered. It murmured, rustled, cracked. It breathed again. But what filled the silence was not balance. It was confusion. Without the leopard, the patterns of fear that shaped every heartbeat in the jungle had begun to unravel. The monkeys screamed too long and too often, warning each other of dangers that no longer came. The birds sang at odd hours, filling the air with calls that collided and confused. The deer, always the most careful, had started to forget the rhythm of caution. At dawn, one such deer stepped into the clearing beneath the old branch. He was young, lean, his coat bright against the dim green. He sniffed the air, lifted his head, and froze. For a moment, instinct tried to remind him. Not here, not this place. But instinct needed a predator to define it, and the leopard's scent was gone. He took another step forward. Above, a group of langurs watched from the trees, restless. They muttered among themselves, shifting branches, their eyes flicking between the deer and the empty space where the shadow used to live. They knew something was wrong with the scene, even if they didn't know why. The deer lowered his head to graze. The sound of his chewing was too loud. The jungle seemed to hesitate. Then, a crack, a branch breaking somewhere in the undergrowth. The deer's head shot up, muscles tight. He stared into the trees, ears twitching. Nothing. He waited, trembling. Then, after a moment too long, he relaxed and began to feed again. But the forest had heard the mistake. The hyena was near. She moved through the shadows, with her belly low to the ground, eyes locked on the young deer. The wind was wrong. It blew her scent toward him. But he didn't react. The air carried her breath. Still, he did not flee. She stopped, surprised. Predators weren't supposed to have it this easy. For a moment, she almost hesitated, not out of mercy, but disbelief. Then hunger decided for her. She lunged. The deer lifted his head too late. His body froze, instinct flickering back like a dying flame. He leapt once, clumsy, desperate. But the forest floor betrayed him. The ground was soft from old rain. His hooves slipped, and her weight struck his side like stone. The forest erupted. Birds exploded from the trees. Monkeys screamed. Insects stopped mid-song. The hyena tore and fed in silence. Her jaws worked fast, efficient. When she finished, she stepped back, breathing hard, her muzzle dark. She looked around. No challenge came. No growl from the dark. No golden eyes from the branches above. She laughed, a low, satisfied sound. But this time, it echoed oddly, bouncing off the trees in uneven rhythm, as if the forest couldn't remember how to absorb it. The langurs fled. The parrots fell silent. The jungle held still again. The hyena dragged what was left of the deer toward the shadow of the fallen tree, her laughter fading into breath. The flies returned, and once more, the clearing was quiet, but not the same quiet as before. It wasn't the silence of absence. It was the silence of something waking up. In the trees above, the wind shifted. The old branch creaked again, low, deliberate, like a breath being drawn in. And this time, when the jungle held its breath, it was not out of loss. It was out of fear. Night returned suddenly, as if someone had pulled it down over the forest like a shroud. The air was thick again, too warm, too heavy, clinging to the leaves like a fever. Even the insects buzzed softer now, their rhythm uneven, broken by pauses that didn't belong to them. The hyena slept beside the half-eaten carcass, her breathing low, slow, deep. Her dreams were shallow, not visions, only fragments of movement, of sound, of laughter that wasn't hers. Then came the noise. It was small at first, a whisper of bark shifting, the faint scrape of claws, not from below but from above. Her ears twitched. She lifted her head, eyes open, pupils wide and black. The night pressed close around her, full of things that didn't move. She stood slow and silent, the muscles in her shoulders rippling beneath her thin fur. The sound came again. She looked up. The canopy was dense, the leaves layered so thickly that the moonlight barely touched the ground. Between them, she thought she saw movement, something gliding, not running. She blinked once, and it was gone. The hyena backed up a few steps. The deer's carcass lay between her and the trees, a dark shape slick with shadow. The smell of blood hung heavy, thick enough to taste. The forest breathed once, then stopped. Something was watching. The hyena lowered herself, tail flat, eyes scanning the darkness. No sound, no scent, only the pressure, that feeling predators knew before they saw what hunted them. A gust of wind moved through the branches. The trees swayed, shedding loose leaves that spun through the air like ash. One landed on her muzzle. She didn't flinch. Then, a sound, a single drop of water falling onto a leaf. Then another. She turned her head toward it. The sound wasn't rain. It was too slow. Another drop fell, landing on her paw. It was dark, thick. She looked up. High in the branches above her, barely visible through the shifting leaves, two eyes glowed faintly, golden, fixed, unblinking. For a moment, the jungle remembered. The air thickened, every sound vanished. Even the flies stopped moving. The hyena froze, breath caught in her throat. She couldn't move, couldn't think. The eyes didn't blink, they didn't breathe, they just were. Then the wind came back, sudden and strong. The branches shook, scattering more leaves, and the eyes disappeared. The forest exhaled, a low moan of bending wood. The hyena stumbled backward, shaking, staring into the canopy. Nothing moved. The night looked the same as before. But the smell had changed. Faint, sharp, familiar. The scent of muscle, of rain-soaked fur, of something that should not have returned. She backed away from the carcass and into the shadows. The jungle watched her leave, silent again, but alive with tension, the kind of silence that waits for what it already knows is coming. Above, on the branch that remembered his weight, something shifted. A faint ripple of shadow passed across the moonlight, soundless, effortless, gone too fast to see. The forest did not breathe for a long time after that, because the leopard's shadow had come back, and the jungle knew it. By the time dawn came, the clouds had gathered thick above the jungle, turning the light gray and heavy. The air trembled with the weight of what hadn't yet fallen. The hyena hadn't slept. She kept close to the roots of a fig tree, eyes fixed on the canopy. Nothing moved, but the feeling remained. The presence that wasn't wind, wasn't shadow, and yet was both. Then the first drop fell. It struck a leaf, rolled off, hit the ground with a dull, perfect sound. Then another. Then 100. Within minutes, the forest was drenched. The rain came hard and sudden, pounding the earth until the air smelled of iron and sap. The sound was deafening, a living curtain of water that erased all other noise. The hyena stood, uncertain. Her fur clung to her sides, her breath steaming in the cool air. She turned toward the clearing, toward the branch that had creaked the night before. It was empty, but the ground beneath it wasn't. A set of tracks led from the trees down to the clearing. Deep, deliberate, Unmistakable. Paw prints, large, circular, too heavy for any cat but one. The rain should have washed them away, but it didn't. The water slid off the edges, as if the forest itself had chosen to keep them. The hyena approached step by step. The prince stopped beside the carcass of the deer, or what little remained of it. The bones were stripped clean, the earth around them undisturbed. No drag marks, no struggle, only precision. She lowered her nose to the ground. The scent was fresh, alive. A rumble rolled across the jungle, not thunder, not the rain, but something lower, closer. It came from the trees. She lifted her head. There he was. The leopard stepped from the undergrowth like a shadow returning to its shape. His coat was soaked, blackened by rain, each movement slow but deliberate. His eyes glowed faint gold through the downpour. Calm, unhurried, certain. He was thinner than before, his ribs faint beneath his fur. Scars lined his flank like rivers drawn in pale silver. But there was no weakness in him, only gravity, the kind that makes the world hold its breath. The hyena backed away, every muscle screaming instinct. Yet the leopard didn't move toward her. He simply stood, watching. The rain pooled between them, rippling. The leopard blinked once, then turned his gaze to the carcass, or rather, the space where it had been. He stepped closer, lowered his head, and exhaled over the bones. The hyena's breath caught. The rain changed. It softened as if listening. The air cooled. The insects fell silent again. Even the thunder moved farther away. The leopard raised his head and looked at her once more. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Predator to scavenger, ruler to survivor. There was no anger there, no dominance, only a kind of weary understanding. Then, without sound, he turned and vanished into the trees. The hyena didn't follow. She stood in the clearing long after he was gone, the rain soaking through her fur, her chest heaving. Around her, the jungle felt different, less broken, more aware. When she finally moved, it was not away. It was toward the trees, where the leopard had gone. Behind her, the branch above the clearing bowed again, heavy with rain. It creaked once, the same note as before, the sound of memory returning to its weight. And as the rain continued to fall, the jungle breathed out for the first time in many nights. Not in fear, not in mourning, in relief. Because the shadow had come home, and balance, fragile, trembling, alive, had begun to rebuild itself beneath the storm.